When most people hear the phrase compound growth, they immediately think about money, interest rates, investments, and bank accounts. And yes, money is one of the most visible places where compound growth shows up. But the truth is, compound growth doesn't begin in your wallet, it begins in your mind. Long before it multiplies your dollars, it multiplies your decisions, your habits, your thinking patterns, and ultimately the way you approach life. Wealthy people understand that wealth is the fruit, but mindset is the soil. And if the soil is not right, it doesn't matter how many seeds you throw on the ground, they'll never grow into anything substantial. The average person often misses this because they want compound growth to be instant. They want to start with $2 today and wake up with millions tomorrow. But compound growth doesn't work that way. It rewards patience, discipline, and foresight. And here's the key: the mindset that produces compound growth is built in small, consistent choices over time, just like the money it eventually creates. That means before your bank account compounds, your discipline compounds. Before your income compounds, your consistency compounds. And before your wealth compounds, your wisdom compounds. Think about this: if you repeat a negative thought every day for 10 years, it compounds into a limiting belief. If you repeat a positive thought every day for 10 years, it compounds into unshakable confidence. If you repeat a destructive habit every day for 10 years, it compounds into a lifestyle of mediocrity. If you repeat a constructive habit every day for 10 years, it compounds into mastery. The question isn't whether something is compounding in your life. The question is what, because compound growth is always working. The only choice you get is whether it compounds in your favor or against you. Wealthy people get this at a deep level. They don't just invest money, they invest in their minds. They know that one insight, one new way of thinking, one mental shift can change everything else that follows. That's why they read, why they pay for mentorship, why they spend hours in deep thought and strategic planning. They understand that knowledge, when compounded, doesn't just add to your capacity, it multiplies it. And once you multiply capacity, income is a byproduct. Now, let me bring this closer to you. If you're starting from nothing, the temptation is to think that money is your biggest problem. But it's not. Your biggest problem is how you think about money, how you think about time, and how you think about yourself. For example, if you see money only as something to spend, it will leave you as fast as it comes. But if you see money as seed, you begin to handle it differently. That one mental shift, spend versus seed, has the power to transform your financial future. And that shift happens in the mind before it ever shows in the numbers. Another example is time. The middle class often trades time for money, and then they run out of time. The wealthy multiply money with time, and they let money work harder than they do. That's a compound growth mindset. And notice, it doesn't start when they're wealthy. It starts when they decide to think like the wealthy. You can be broke and still think like an investor. You can be broke and still think long-term. You can be broke and still plant seeds for the future. And when you do, those small mental investments compound into wealth over time. Here's the part most people don't want to hear. The reason they never experience the miracle of compound growth is because they keep resetting the clock. They start a new habit, but when it doesn't pay off in 30 days, they stop. They make a small investment. But when it doesn't double in a year, they withdraw it. They try reading or learning, but when it feels slow, they give up. Every time you stop, you reset the compounding process back to zero. But wealthy people endure the slow beginning. They understand that at first, compound growth feels invisible. Nothing seems to be happening, but once it builds momentum, it feels unstoppable. So if you want compound growth to work for you, you need to commit to compounding in your thinking. Feed your mind with wealth principles every day. Practice patience in your decisions. Build consistency in your actions. And most importantly, keep the clock running, because the mind you develop will always precede the money you make. The wealthy know that you cannot out-earn a poor mindset. If you try, the mindset will always shrink the money back down to the level of your thinking. But if you expand your mind, your money has no choice but to rise to meet it. Compound growth, then, is not just a financial principle. It's a life principle. And once you align your thinking with it, you will find that everything else begins to multiply in your favor. So I'll leave you with this. Wealth doesn't start with your bank account, it starts with your beliefs. Compound growth is already working in your life right now. The only question is whether it's compounding mediocrity or compounding mastery. Choose wisely what you allow to multiply, because over time, those choices will create a life so large or so limited that you'll either be grateful for it or regret it. The mind compounds before the money. Plant the right seeds and you'll harvest the right future. Most people look at compound growth and reduce it to a financial formula. Put money in, leave it long enough, and it grows. But the true power of compounding lies in habits, the small, repetitive actions that seem insignificant in the moment but become life-altering over time. Money follows behavior, and behavior is the outflow of habits. If you want compound growth in your wealth, you must first establish compound growth in your actions. Here's the truth: the wealthy don't just build habits, they build systems of habits. And these aren't glamorous, dramatic, or flashy. They're small, almost invisible choices that compound into massive outcomes. Think about it. Eating one unhealthy meal won't kill you, just like skipping one workout won't destroy your health. But repeated over months and years, those small decisions compound into either disease or vitality. The same is true with wealth. Spending a 20 recklessly doesn't make you poor. Saving and investing a $20 once won't make you rich. But repeat either one consistently over time, and you'll see the divergence between poverty and wealth grow wider and wider. What makes habits so powerful is that they don't just add results, they multiply them. Habits compound because they create momentum. And momentum is one of the most underestimated forces in success. Once momentum is established, effort seems to decrease while results increase. At first, building a new habit feels heavy and unnatural. You have to consciously remind yourself, push yourself, discipline yourself. But the longer you repeat it, the less effort it requires, until eventually it becomes automatic. When a habit is automatic, compounding accelerates. The wealthy understand this, and that's why they focus on building habits that work even when they're not paying attention. They don't have to try to save they built a habit. They don't have to force themselves to read or think strategically. It's already ingrained in who they are. Once a habit becomes identity, compounding is inevitable. But let me point out something that most people ignore. Habits are never neutral. Every habit you have is either compounding for you or against you. There is no middle ground. Scrolling endlessly on your phone compounds distraction. Complaining compounds negativity. Procrastination compounds missed opportunities. On the other hand, reading compounds knowledge. Networking compounds relationships. Investing compounds wealth. Every day, you are feeding a set of habits that are quietly shaping your destiny. The tragedy is most people don't notice until years later when they look up and ask, how did I end up here? And here's the sobering part to you. Your current reality is nothing more than the sum of your compounded habits. If you're financially struggling, it didn't happen overnight. It was the product of years of small spending, neglecting to invest, failing to learn new skills, or avoiding difficult but necessary actions. The good news is if your current habits got you here, new habits can take you somewhere else. But you must begin intentionally, because compounding only rewards consistency. This is why wealthy people are ruthless about their routines. They understand that every habit is either a servant or a master. They make their habits serve their vision rather than allowing destructive habits to enslave them. That means they're willing to endure short-term discomfort to establish long-term reward. Think about the patience it takes to read a book instead of watching TV, to invest money instead of spending it, to exercise discipline instead of indulging in comfort. None of those choices seem life-changing in the moment, but over time, the compounding effect makes them monumental. Now, let's bring this to a practical level. If you want compound growth to work in your life, identify the 1 or 2 habits that would most radically alter your future if compounded over the next 5 years. It doesn't have to be 10 things. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe it's setting aside a fixed percentage of every dollar you earn. Maybe it's reading for 30 minutes a day. Maybe it's reaching out to 1 new person in your network every week. Small hinges swing big doors, and the smallest consistent actions are the hinges that open the biggest opportunities. And here's something profound to think about. Habits don't just compound in what they give you, they compound in who you become. Saving money doesn't just give you wealth, it makes you disciplined. Reading doesn't just give you knowledge, it makes you wise. Exercising doesn't just give you health, it makes you resilient. So the question isn't only, what will I get from this habit, but who will I become if I continue this habit long enough? Because wealth is never just about what you have, it's about who you are. The mistake most people make is waiting for motivation before they build habits. But motivation is inconsistent, habits are consistent. If you rely on feeling inspired to act, you'll only get sporadic results. But if you build habits that work regardless of emotion, you've set compounding in motion and nothing can stop it. So as you think about compound growth, don't just think about dollars multiplying in an account. Think about habits multiplying in your life. The greatest fortune you'll ever build isn't in your bank account, it's in the identity you're compounding day after day. Because once you become the kind of person whose habits align with wealth, abundance becomes inevitable. Let me leave you with this. Your habits are either quietly stealing your future or quietly building it. And the difference between the poor and the wealthy is not found in one dramatic decision. It's found in the quiet, consistent habits that compound over time. Choose habits that align with your vision, and the compound effect will ensure that one day your future looks exactly like what you've been practicing. When we talk about compound growth, most people immediately picture numbers on a spreadsheet or a graph that curves upward. But the truth is, compound growth isn't limited to money. In fact, the most valuable compounding in your life doesn't even show up in your bank account at first. It shows up in your mindset, your skills, and the way you see the world. Because money is simply a reflection of value, and value always flows to those who have multiplied their inner resources. If you want the compound effect to work for you, it must first work in you. Think about this. Every skill you acquire compounds with every other skill you already have. If you know how to communicate and then you learn how to sell, those 2 skills together multiply your influence and earning power. If you understand numbers and then you learn leadership, you don't just add another skill, you expand the impact of both. The compound effect is exponential because skills, once stacked, make each other more powerful. This is why some people accelerate in life while others remain stuck. They are compounding knowledge and abilities while everyone else is recycling the same old information. But compounding doesn't stop with skills. It also applies to relationships. The more you invest in people, the stronger your network becomes, and that network compounds in influence. One introduction leads to another. One opportunity opens the door to 10 more. At first, it feels like nothing is happening. You're just meeting people, helping people, learning to listen, learning to give. But over time, those seeds of investment grow into a web of connections that make you wealthy in opportunities before you're wealthy in money. And let's not overlook the compounding of mindset. If you feed your mind with scarcity, fear, and doubt, it compounds into hesitation, missed chances, and self-sabotage. But if you consistently nurture your mind with abundance, courage, and wisdom, those beliefs compound into action, resilience, and breakthroughs. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes the reality you eventually live. Compounded thoughts create compounded outcomes. This is why you can give 2 people the same amount of time, the same amount of resources, and the same opportunity. One will multiply and the other will waste it. The difference is not circumstance, the difference is mindset. Now, what makes this even more powerful is that inner compounding often precedes financial compounding. The money doesn't show up until the habits, the skills, and the mindset are in place. That's why impatient people sabotage their future. They want the compound effect in their bank account without first embracing the compound effect in their character. They want harvest without sowing. They want wealth without wisdom. But if you commit to compounding in your inner world, the outer world eventually catches up. And when it does, the growth looks like overnight success to everyone else. Let me illustrate this with an example. Imagine you spend 1 hour a day learning a new skill, just 1 hour. At first, it feels small. You might not even notice the difference in a week. But in a year, that's 365 hours, almost the equivalent of 9 40-hour work weeks. Over 5 years, that's more than 800 hours invested in a single area of growth. Do you really think someone who has put in nearly 2,000 focused hours won't see a radical difference in their opportunities, income, and influence? That's the compound effect at work. Not in dollars yet, but in becoming the type of person who attracts dollars. And here's where many people get trapped. They underestimate the long-term impact of internal compounding because they're fixated on short-term financial gains. They chase quick money instead of building lasting capacity. But capacity is what determines sustainability. Anyone can get lucky once, but only those who have compounded their skills, mindset, and network can sustain wealth across decades and even generations. This is why I often say wealth is not something you pursue. It's something you attract by who you become. If you become the kind of person who is disciplined, knowledgeable, and connected, wealth has no choice but to find you. The compound effect guarantees it. Your wealth cannot grow beyond your wisdom, and your income cannot outpace your identity. So the real work is not in chasing external growth, but in building internal momentum that compounds until the external is inevitable. So as you think about compounding, don't limit your vision to what can be measured in a calculator. See the deeper compounding happening in your habits, your skills, your mindset, and your relationships. Because money is just a shadow of those things. It always follows. Focus on becoming the kind of person who compounds the right things daily, and the wealth will come as a byproduct, not as the main pursuit. Let me leave you with this thought. The most powerful compounding doesn't start in your bank account, it starts in your soul. Compound wisdom, compound discipline, compound courage, and the wealth will follow you because you've already become wealthy within. And the person who becomes wealthy within can never lose, no matter what happens in the market. When people hear about compound growth, they usually stop at the mathematics of it. They see charts, percentages, and dollar signs, and that's where their understanding ends. But here's the truth. Compound growth is not just a financial principle. It is a universal law of life. And just like any law, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't say, I'll work for your money, but not for your character. It works in every dimension of who you are, your habits, your relationships, your influence, your legacy. The question is not whether compounding is happening in your life. The real question is, what is compounding in your life? If you're sowing distraction every day, distraction will compound. If you're sowing excuses, excuses will compound. If you're sowing discipline, discipline will compound. The law is neutral, but the results are not. That's why some people arrive at a place in life where they seem unstoppable. Not because they made one big decision, but because they consistently made small, aligned decisions that compounded over time. Others, however, wake up frustrated, asking why life hasn't changed, not realizing they've been compounding laziness, doubt, or fear for years. Now, here's the beautiful and sobering part. Compounding works best over time, which means time is either your greatest ally or your greatest enemy. The earlier you align with it, the greater the payoff. That's why when you look at people who seem to have built extraordinary lives, you'll notice they started stacking little disciplines and little investments long before anyone was paying attention. They were compounding in the dark, and eventually they harvested in the light. But if compounding is a law that governs not just money but life, then legacy is its highest expression. Money compounds into wealth, habits compound into character, choices compound into destiny. But when you zoom out far enough, all of these compoundings converge into one thing: the legacy you leave behind. Legacy is simply compound growth seen across generations. It's the fruit of what you've planted, not just for yourself, but for those who come after you. Think about it. If you instill in your children the discipline of saving, the mindset of abundance, and the courage to take calculated risks, that mindset will outlast any money you give them. That's because wisdom, when passed down, compounds through every decision they make, every risk they take, every opportunity they create. And that compounding doesn't stop with them. It echoes through their children and grandchildren. The money might run out, but the compounded mindset becomes a generational inheritance. On the flip side, a lack of discipline also compounds into a legacy. If all you leave behind is debt, scarcity thinking, and fear-based decision making, that too gets compounded. And the people who come after you will not only inherit your assets or liabilities, they'll inherit your example. The compounding doesn't stop at your life, it accelerates into theirs. This is why compound growth is not just a financial tool, but a moral responsibility. You're not just managing your money, you're managing the principles that will ripple through your family, your community, and even people you may never meet. Every dollar you invest, every habit you build, every belief you nurture is not just about you. It's about the trajectory of everyone connected to you. That's why I often say the true wealth is not the money you leave your children, but the wisdom you leave in them. Because wisdom is the seed that multiplies everything else. And if you really want to understand the power of compound growth, you need to stop thinking in terms of days and start thinking in terms of decades. Ask yourself, what will this habit, this investment, this relationship look like not in a week, but in 10 years? How will it echo in 20? How will it shape generations in 50? If you can learn to see time the way wealthy people see it, you'll realize that the little moves you make today carry far greater weight than they appear to in the moment. This is why the wealthy don't just ask, what will this earn me? They ask, what will this become? They know that a dollar invested is not a dollar, it's a seed. They know that a disciplined choice is not just a sacrifice, it's a foundation. They know that compound growth is not just about accumulating more, but about becoming more. So here's the challenge. Stop looking for the quick win and start building the compounding win. Stop obsessing over what you can get in a week and start investing in what you can create in a lifetime. Because in the end, money is temporary, but legacy is eternal. And the compound growth that truly matters is not measured in your bank balance, but in the impact you leave on this world. The law of compounding is working right now in your life, whether you acknowledge it or not. The seeds you're planting are either growing into a harvest you'll rejoice over or weeds you'll regret. So choose carefully, because the most powerful question you can ask yourself is not, what will I earn from this? But what will this become if I let it compound? And when you start living with that awareness, you'll find that compound growth is no longer just a financial principle you apply. It becomes the guiding principle of your entire life. So let me leave you with this. Compound growth is not just about getting rich. It's about becoming rich in wisdom, in character, in relationships, and in legacy. And when you become rich in those things, money will not just follow you, it will outlive you. That is the true secret of compound growth.